What's up everyone, this is Andres Gesteira, co-founder of AIMP Poland, JS Poland and AI Poland. Welcome back to the AI Master Podcast. Today we've got a special guest joining us from Madrid, Angular expert, designing and implementing robust, scalable applications while also exploring the power of AI in software development. Ladies and gentlemen, Andres Gesteira. Hi Andres, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Perfect. So for those who don't know you yet, please tell us about yourself and what you do.
Well, my name is Andres. I am an Angular architect. I have been working with Angular for many years, since Angular JS, and I am very passionate about it. And recently I started working with artificial intelligence and applying, the AI features to my Angular workflow. And it's been proven to be very useful, and I guess that's why we are talking about it today.
What sparked your interest in AI-assisted development?
Well, to be totally honest, my own company. Like I was just doing, prompts with ChatGPT, asking questions, explain me the code, etc., etc. But eventually, my company decided to buy a team license for Cursor, and then all the employees of the company are allowed to, if they want to use it, just apply to the workflow that they are using in the local machine. And I decided to go for it. And it's been a very interesting journey, actually. In the beginning, it was very impressive. Of course, now I am pretty much used to it in my daily basis. I use it every day. And it was very smooth because it's basically just Visual Studio Code with AI superpowers. So I guess Cursor has been the reason why I started investigating more into what other tools are there in the market.
So what exactly are supervised agents and how do they differ from chatbots?
Yeah, that's the key difference, right? When you are using, for example, ChatGPT, that is a chatbot. So essentially, ChatGPT is an AI assistant, but it doesn't make any decisions, right? The agents, this supervised, because we have to supervise them. The supervised agents make decisions. They are decision makers. And that is the key difference, because those decisions ultimately translate into software development that is, of course, supervised by us step by step. But then, the application you develop is AI assisted while you develop. And it's because of those agents who, let's say, can predict what you want and can make the decisions with your permission.
What are the most common AI-assisted features developers use today?
I mean, when you are working with these tools, there are basically two things to the so-called vibe coding, right? On one hand, there is the code auto-completion with AI, which they call nowadays tap, tap, tap. They call it tap, tap, tap because you use the tab key of your keyboard to accept suggestions that the AI is inputting in your code as you write. It's not written in the file, but it's shown in the IDE. And then with you push tab on it, you just get the whole code and you can keep coding, and it's actually quite fast, but it can also be quite dangerous. It's similar to what we had before with Copilot, right? But it's a little bit more advanced. That's on one hand. On the other hand, there's the big feature, the code generation. And it's like you are using a chat similar to ChatGPT, but embedded in your IDE. And then you are doing code generation through your prompts with natural language, either written or by voice, because you can also, for example, Windsurf allows you to record, a voice message, translate into words, and then it's sent as a prompt to the IDE. So code auto-completion on one side and code generation on the other side. But of course, it also has the same underlying capabilities of any, assistant. You can answer. It can answer questions for you. It can also explain the code for you. It can also execute tests for you. And on top of that, it can connect with very famous platforms like GitHub or Jira or Slack, to perform actions. And if you sum up those actions all together, this group of actions constitute a workflow. So it can also trigger workflows. And all these things together makes it like a very powerful tool, actually. Yeah.
Do those tools really boost productivity, or can they sometimes get in the way?
That's the interesting question for the companies, right? Because they are all like blindly believing that these tools boost productivity like crazy. I think the key factor here is to know when and how to use these tools, like when to use them and when not, right? Because these tools are highly customized, right? And they always need they need you to point them into the right direction. Otherwise, they will not work properly and they will make you waste time, right? So I guess what we are talking about here is prompt engineer, like write the prompt in the proper format, use the proper tooling, add custom rules, and then it will work very much fine-tuned. But if you don't do it, it will not, it will work very poorly. So the better the prompt, the better the answer. But how long did it take you to write that prompt? And how long it would have taken you to just write the code manually, right? That is the question that we should ask ourselves. So the mindset you need to maintain is when it comes to AI-assisted development, just anticipate your needs. Like nowadays, AI makes many mistakes, and some other times it directly lies in your face, like it tells you lies. They call it hallucinations, AI hallucinations. It can say, I can say in general, these tools boost productivity, but not as much as we expect them. However, I think we are just in the beginning of this race, of the AI-assisted tools, and I think it's going to improve very quickly and very much. So for example, repetitive tasks, mechanical tasks that can be automated, I think AI is going to do a good job. And of course, that will boost productivity, but only to a certain degree, not a lot, let's say.
Which tool would you say pioneered the AI coding trend?
Well, that was GitHub Copilot, no doubt. I think it was launched in 2021. And despite of the fact that it didn't work very well, because I was in Berlin at the We Are Developers World Congress, for example. There was a presentation of GitHub Copilot and everything was failing. I also saw other presentations where like it was not doing a good job, but still, it was widely adopted by the developers. They trusted it because they knew that behind it there was OpenAI, LLMs. And I think that is like what pioneered everything, that all the tools that came after that were inspired by GitHub Copilot, which was, by the way, not a bad solution for algorithmic functions, right? Because, you would just write into line comments what you wanted to do, and then there were code suggestions. And of course, you want to, for example, implement the Fibonacci the Fibonacci sequence, and it would, propose you even several solutions because there is not only one way of implementing it. Like with any other algorithm, I found it pretty useful for these, functions, but for full implementations, full features, it was not useful at all.
What are the most prominent tools on the market right now?
Well, I would say the one I'm currently using, Cursor, is the most famous one. It's quite good. It's a fork of Visual Studio Code, but with AI capabilities integrated into it. So it's highly customizable and very performant. The advantage of this tool is that it can import your Visual Studio Code settings into it seamlessly and all the extensions you have and everything. So you will, apart from the AI, tooling, you will not notice the difference. However, this had also a con, which is that people who don't like people who don't like Visual Studio Code have a problem because, it's pretty much like Visual Studio Code. So if you are used to use, for example, IntelliJ, you will not like using Cursor. But in my case, that is not a problem. Also, it increases your screen. You see, because for example, I have it on the left-hand side, the Explorer with the folder structure, and then in the center, I have the code editor. Then to the other side, you will need to have the Chat AI panel. So the Chat AI panel is where the magic happens, right? And it's the same for Cursor, it's the same for Windsurf, it's the same for all of them, actually. This is where the magic is happening. And it is extremely similar, Cursor and Windsurf, but also you can achieve the same result by adding extensions. Like you can still use Visual Studio Code and add some extensions to it and make the whole IDE look like Windsurf or Cursor. And that is to say, you can, for example, add GitHub Copilot chat. They made it recently. It works well. But of course, you will not have just as many options and configuration, and it will not be as fine-tuned as Cursor. There is also something called Klein. It's very famous. It was previously known as Cloud Dev because they were using only Anthropic LLMs. Currently, you can just use any LLM. So they rebranded it to Klein, and it is open source. So it's for free and you can use it. Of course, the problem with this thing is and we will talk about it later, is the privacy concerns, right? And there is also a fork of Klein. It's called RuCode, which is even better in my opinion because it accepts many multi-agents and many things. It's very, very customizable, and it's also for free. But again, we will talk about the privacy concerns later because maybe for big corporations, it's better to pay for Cursor or for Windsurf. The good news is that all these options accept MCP support. So they accept model context protocol integration. And that is very useful because that's the way you connect to external platforms. You connect to GitHub, to Slack, to Jira, to anything through MCP servers. Even you can create your own MCP servers. So this is something that makes this tool even more powerful. And of course, as that, I will mention Firebase Studio, which formerly was known as IDX Project by Google. I think this is a great tool, but I am not familiar with that one. I cannot say if it's really good or not. It looks nice, but I am pretty much focused on local development, and this one runs in the cloud. So it's very special, but I have never used it.
So what are the key differences between them?
Well, first of all, there is the license, right? Cursor and Windsurf, you have to pay for it because they belong to companies, and Klein and RuCode are for free because they are open source, right? Same goes for Copilot chat. It's by Microsoft, so you have to pay for it. Otherwise, you will be limited by the number of prompts you can do a day or something or a week. I don't know. Then you have to keep in mind that if you have a special taste for some certain IDEs, for example, you like IntelliJ, maybe it would be good for you that the tool is cross IDE. For example, Klein and RuCode are extensions, so is Copilot chat, right? So you can apply that to any editor. So if you like, I don't know, PyCharm or WebStorm or whatever, you can apply those tools to them. You are not bounded to use Visual Studio Code. And then there are the modes. So this is an important concept. How do these things work, right? It can work like ChatGPT. So you can ask questions and you can just put them in ask mode or conversation mode. But you can also set the chat to the agent, which is what makes the decisions, right? But there is something called plan and act. And this is important because sometimes you are just, doing tap, like small snippets of code. Then you go to the chat to create a task or to do a full task with the chat and generate the code with it. But if the task is very big, you will need to split it into different subtasks. So the first thing you need to do is set the agent in a way that before doing anything, it thinks about what it's going to do. That's the plan mode. That's something that Cursor doesn't have. Actually, there is a workaround, which is creating a rule file that says, okay, if I tell you to plan, you plan. And if I tell you to act, you do the code, right? But in Windsurf, they have this. They have the plan mode or the planning mode. And so do the client and root code editors. And I think this is becoming a standard, you see, because when it comes to big tasks, usually the AI makes a huge mess. So it's important to master all those modes for your agent. And then you can also customize like different agents. This is also not available in Cursor or Windsurf, but in client and root code, it is available that you can create different agents and use them simultaneously. Like, for example, because when you write a prompt, for example, normally you have to, it's like a Jira story. In a Jira story, you say, as a developer, something, as a product owner, something. Here is, you have to tell the AI what kind of persona it is. Like, you are a product owner, you are a quality assurance engineer, you are blah, blah, blah. You can actually create a different agent for all those roles. And if you have a testing task, you just use the agent for testing tasks. Or if you are, I don't know, if you want to generate automatic documentation, you say, okay, I am a product owner or whatever. So this is actually another way of mastering, the way you use AI with custom agents. And this is not available in all the tools. And also, with regard to the LLMs, you have like several choices. Like in Cursor and Windsurf, you have the most famous ones. You have the Anthropic ones, you have the OpenAI ones, but there are many. Like, there are really many LLMs, right? And there is one way of using any LLM you want, which is using an LLM aggregator. An LLM aggregator is a way to have like a proxy server. You call through this API to this server, and this server just points out to one or another LLM. And the most famous one is OpenRouter. If you use OpenRouter, you can just use the OpenRouter API and call any LLM you want, and that's very, very useful. It can be done with Cursor, but with Cursor and Windsurf, it's a little tricky. You need to include a configuration through OpenAI API, but it works. And then, last but not least, there is an amazing feature which actually removes all the privacy concerns, which is using local LLMs. Like, you download the LLM into your machine, and it makes HTTP calls, but in the local host, because it's installed locally. So just, every prompt you send is sent to your own machine, and there is no data sent outside of your machine, no privacy concerns, no nothing. So that would be very cool if we would start using them. But with Cursor and Windsurf, because maybe they are not so interested in using that thing, you can achieve the same by using something called Ollama, which is a platform for downloading local LLMs. And with Windsurf, you can use a Docker configuration, but it doesn't work very well, to be honest. So those are, like, in general, just to recap, all the features that these tools offer. Like, you have the modes, you have the agents, you have the LLMs. Basically, that's it. And with the combination of all those things, if you customize your tool very professionally, you can also achieve very professional results. It's amazing.
What about terminal-based alternatives? Do you use or recommend any?
I don't use them, but I do know people who use them a lot, and I don't stop hearing about these terminal-based tools. Like, I have a friend who works for ByteDance, and he tells me a lot about Cloud Code, and I have been testing it myself this weekend for this podcast, actually. So, I mean, it also depends on your days. Do you prefer to work with the terminal? Do you prefer to work with the IDE? Like, if you want to, because I know people who use the terminal for just everything. So for those people, this is perfect. But on top of that, the terminal has some advantages, right? Because you run everything at a system, at a file system level, and that has advantages in some ways. The most prominent tool, as I said, is Cloud Code. Is designed by Anthropic, so it has a pro, which at the same time is a con, or can be seen as a con, which is that it only uses or it can only use anthropic LLMs, which are Sonnet and Opus. Sonnet is good for code developing, and Opus is good for planning. You see what I said before about planning or thinking before doing anything. For that, the Opus LLM is great. And you cannot use any other LLMs, only the anthropic ones, but the integration is just great. It's great. It works perfectly. So, and not only the integration, it has like interoperability, which is something that no IDE has. Like, for example, you have to be all the time selecting which LLM you want. In this case, the terminal can decide, is clever enough to decide, depending on the task, what LLM should be used, either Sonnet or Opus. And on top of that, you can also integrate it into your IDE, because you can actually also achieve the code auto-completion. So you can have vibe code into it as well. And it also offers like more transparency, because it asks you for permission for everything, like everything it does. Is this okay if I make this HTTP call? Yes, please do so, and don't ask me again. So these kind of things are great. And also the latency is a little less. So it can be a little faster than the other options, because you see, when you, for example, you are doing a task with Cursor, you send the prompt with other information, of course, to the Cursor servers. And from those servers, it sends the prompt plus the other information to the corresponding LLM. In here, because the LLMs are already in the anthropic servers, it's the same servers and there is much less latency. So it's faster because of that. And also it has modes as well. You can also manually switch between manual mode, auto accept mode. So all the changes will be auto accepted, and also plan mode, which is like, offer me a plan with a list of tasks or subtasks that we are going to do. And if you accept it, it will do it one by one. However, because Cloud Code is not perfect, like no tool is, it doesn't currently offer the same granular change approval capabilities as Cursor, or since it makes changes only directly into the files, right? And, it doesn't have any intermediate review approval step that you can see in the editor, because in Cursor, you can actually approve changes by file or by a snippet. And here it doesn't work that way. It offers you all the changes for all the files, and you accept them, and then you go to the Git diff and you see what has been done, and you can modify it, right? But it doesn't offer that level of granularity with regard to Git changes. And there are also other terminal tools like Aider or Goose are similar to Cloud Code, but of course, in that case, you can use any other LLMs apart from the anthropic ones. And there is something called Warp. Warp is actually a very famous terminal. And now in version 2, they have made it AI friendly. And it has a lot of integration with a lot of AI capabilities. And it's great. It's actually like, it's the other way around, because when you have Visual Studio Code, for example, you have Visual Studio Code and you have the integrated terminal. And this is the other way around. You have the terminal, and inside it, you have the integrated code editor. So actually, you work more with the terminal, but you can actually edit also from the terminal, the code. And it's not Beam, it's an integrated code editor into Warp. So Warp is really, really amazing, to be honest.
So generally speaking, what privacy concerns do you see when using those tools?
Yeah, I mean, this is very important, and it's very important that the legal department of every company takes a look into those tools or the policy they use before hiring their services or paying for them, because what you need to understand or be fully aware of is that every prompt you send, the tool is sending calls to cloud servers that that investigate the information you send them, and that includes the chunks of your code. And in that code, of course, your code can, depending on the repository, of course, but it can contain sensitive information that you don't want to share with anybody. Even the information that is not sensitive, you also do not want to share it. So you are working on an open source project, and that is not an issue in my humble opinion. But if your repository is private, and belongs to the company, you need to be extremely careful and ask permissions from your manager first. And the manager will ask the legal department of the company if it's okay to use the license. Normally, companies buy these plans, and these plans, like for example, for Cursor and for Windsurf, they include data protection, like sections. The first one you need to pay attention to is the zero data retention policy. It should be included in the contract, right? Which means that the data is not persisted in the servers after the window period is closed, like, I don't know, or the session is closed. It should be like between some hours to 24 hours, something like that. But after that, the data disappears from memory. And that's how it should be. And also you have to make sure that these companies are not trading with your information for LLM training, because sometimes they sell them to, I don't know, to OpenAI, to these guys, for training out to make the LLM better or smarter. And there are leaks of information. I've seen it actually. And so you have to be extremely careful. It's something that is still under discussion. And I don't think people are fully aware of the dangers of using these tools without proper supervision. On top of that, tools like Cursor and Windsurf are designed to work with teams inside big corporations. And that means that because, essentially it's a fork of Visual Studio Code, and that allows you to have local databases, right? So Cursor has underneath a database specifically for the kind of information that is going to be sent to the servers. And that information is fully encrypted before sending to the server. So it's quite good. And the metadata too, they have their own data structure, let's say. So with that and with that data protection paragraphs that I mentioned, you should be okay to go. Or if you are, like I said, in an open source project, in that way, I mean, the code is on GitHub or whatever, and it's public, so I don't see the issue. And of course, what we mentioned before about the local LLMs, that's another solution that mitigates this problem, which means that even if you make many prompts, no information goes to any server because it's running exclusively in your machine. So that's actually, I think, something that we are going to be using more and more because of these privacy concerns. Yes.
How do you personally use Cursor in your day-to-day work?
I use it for many reasons, but mostly because I understand this is the way of the future, and so does my company. My company understands that in the future, we are all going to be working with these tools. So it is very important that we start doing it as soon as possible. We have not yet integrated Cursor with GitHub or Jira or Slack. We are, it's under a discussion. I don't know where because I don't belong to this department. But this year is Cursor. I don't know, maybe the next year will be the next tool or tools. Maybe we will use several tools. We have several licenses. But as a company, we are quite certain that this is the way we want to work, like assisted by AI. And of course, we were previously already doing it, right, with GitHub Copilot. And this is just the next step. Nowadays, GitHub actually can produce a first version of a PR completely by just, asking, I'll say, like, do me a PR of, migrate all the end-to-end tests from Cypress to Playwright. Do it for me. And it will create a full PR, like, because it has indexed like all your repository. Of course, it will be wrong for sure. The code will be wrong, but at least you have a first version of the PR. And then it's like, I mean, the workflow starts much earlier with the AI assisted tools. You can also do it locally. And apart from this AI enhanced tool, there is also something very expensive called Debian. Debian is founded, I think it's founded by one of the guys who also founded Facebook. And it's a very serious project, actually, but not many people have heard about it. And it's fully autonomous, controls various workflows, like the PR example that I just made, with minimal manual or human intervention, which means that the purpose of Debian, as it sells itself as the first AI developer, is to replace developers. That is really how they are selling it. Of course, it doesn't replace developers, but that's the goal of Debian. I don't know. We need some time to assimilate these this AI tsunami, that we need to realize what is going on and ultimately what is the best way to set our workflows. And, for everything, for software development, for planning, for documentation, for deployment, for everything. But we just don't know yet. We are just scratching the surface, and but I guess we will know soon because this just moves incredibly fast.
AI tsunami, well said.
Yes.
What's your favorite AI feature in Cursor?
Cursor rules, definitely. I am very passionate about it because, like I said, I'm an Angular architect, and for me, I've been working with the framework since 2016, and it's a very opinionated framework. And also, the Angular documentation is referencing rule files. So they are actually the Angular team is encouraging people to produce rule files. And they are available in almost all the tools, I think they're called instructions in GitHub Copilot and in Visual Studio Code, but they shouldn't be called instructions because really they have the power to be many things. The rules, they are something we need to adapt to when building the architecture, and you have the chance to declare in Markdown format either a plan with subtasks that can be set by the AI tool, a set of instructions for code generation, and also guidelines for the kind of technology you are using, for example, for Angular. And this is obviously not only a need, but it's just not optional. It's something that you have to do because think of it. If the developers are going to start relying on code generation and the code generation is going to make a mess, it's going to increase the technical debt exponentially if you don't do this, because the code will be generated wrongly if you don't set those rules to the code. Actually, there's a guy that I admire a lot from Google. His name is Adi Osmani, and he has published many articles on the ethics and the supervision on how you need to work with AI-generated code. And it's great. I recommend everybody to read his articles. So the better the code, the less you need to supervise, right? So that's how rules come into play. So they provide the agent with context. This is something I haven't spoken about, but on top of the actual context that automatically gets, from the AI assistant, you can explicitly tell the AI assistant or the agent, this is the context, right? You can, for example, set the Angular documentation as part of the context, or say, okay, this file is the context, or this set of files are the context. But also you can say, okay, these rules are the context, right? So rules contain, at least in Cursor, but I also think it's the same in Windsurf, they contain metadata. So first they contain a description, which is better if you do a good description, actually. And then there is an option to always apply this as a context of the agent or not. By default, it's set to true, like it always gets it, but you can also set it conditionally, like you can set the context depending on what files are going to be generated or on what files are you working. So for example, I just created a rule for Angular component, right? Angular components, so it applies to .component.ts files. And this is actually why I find, the component suffix is very useful, and I don't know why the Angular team wants to remove it. But anyway, let's not talk about it because this is a different topic. But this suffix comes in handy because you can tell the custom rule only apply this context or this rule to files that end up in component.ts, right? And it's been proving very useful because you can set the whole guidelines. And in that way, when it comes to the generation of a component, rather than its edition, I have a rule that it always applies and it's connected to the good practices. One on the side and one on the other side is connected to another rule, which is the instructions or steps to create a component, which ultimately triggers the the developer customized schematics that I have for Angular component generation. I have a script for that. And that is, in my opinion, the only way to make people create components in exactly the same way. The problem of using different and unpredictable prompt formats with different, by choice LLMs is that the response of the agent can change a lot, depending on the options you have chosen. The component generation will be different. So the funny thing is that after so much work in me setting the rules for, good practices on components and also how a component should be generated, in the end, it just comes to an Angular schematics script that gets executed, which could be done manually right from the beginning by the developers. But anyway, I think it's actually good to have rules, and actually it's a must if you don't want to increase your technical depth. So goods are really cool.
Have you seen measurable productivity gains, or are they still points of friction?
Well, after many, many tasks that I have made on Cursor, either manually or not manually, I can tell you that the best quality code is actually the one made by hand, by the developer. If the developer is senior, if it's junior, it doesn't matter much. But if it's someone with a criteria, that code is actually the best. It doesn't matter if it takes longer or shorter, but it's actually the best. For example, it's funny, how providing a unit test, a task that would typically be or should be done perfectly performed by the AI agent, is usually a mess with it. Whenever I ask the AI agent to provide some unit tests or, to modify one, it's horrible. It makes unrequested changes. Sometimes, like, for example, I'm testing a component and it makes changes in the component class so that the test can pass. And that's cheating, right? Yeah, but on the other hand, there are other tasks, like, for example, I have to write many Node.js scripts. And for that, it's actually great, because I'm not the most skilled person at writing scripts. And the AI helps, but also I have really checked that the code is really good and it works. And things, scripts that would, take me 1 day or 2 days to write, I have written in question of hours. So I guess we are currently at the stage where things could be refined, but the question is, will this ever work well? With the rules that I mentioned and the MCP service, we can customize it a lot, our coding workflows. But this will ever reach the point where the code is perfect? I don't know, really. I'm not sure of that. Besides, many times trying to implement a feature with the help of the AI takes longer than if you do it yourself. That's why I said in the beginning that you need to anticipate this, to be able to say, okay, I'm going to do this manually because I know that with the AI it's going to take longer. So it can improve productivity. I have seen that, but by tops 30%. If companies want to sell you the idea that AI tools increase the productivity in more than 50%, I would be skeptical about it, at least at the moment.
Are developers at the risk of being replaced by AI, or we are simply being augmented?
Well, not replace. No, I don't think anything can replace a developer. Like, for replacing a developer, you would have to replace a person. And to replace a person, generative AI doesn't do. You would need to be looking at artificial general intelligence, which is the goal of I don't know who, actually. This looks like Isaac Asimov novel, but like iRobot or something like that. The kind of intelligence that is intuitive and things and stuff like that. What we are looking at is not that. Our generative AIs are simply software. They are pattern recognizers that make predictions based on LLM training. So AI is not coming for our jobs, it's coming for our tasks. Mechanical, repetitive tasks that can be automated, they will be automated for sure. So developers need to recycle themselves and go into the next thing. We need to understand how these tools work and how to implement them correctly. And that's the only way that we will not be extincted by getting merged with the technology, I would say.
What impact do you think AI will have on hiring, onboarding, and team dynamics?
Well, I think some new roles are going to emerge, right? Of course, there were already people working on big data, on machine learning. These things already existed, right? But I guess the new roles will be a combination of those capabilities in combination with certain concrete things. I don't know. And as per this very specialized developers like me who have been like doing the same technology all the time, we will have to adapt to the AI thing. Like we will need to what I'm doing now, like trying to take it to my advantage, right? And I'm guessing prompt engineers is what we are going all of us to become to some degree. And I think this can be extrapolated to other departments too. It's not only engineering, it can be HR or it can be marketing, it can be anything. I think everybody is using it. Even lawyers are concerned about this, right? So this is it's a technology that is transforming our whole structure of our society to many levels, I would say.
What advice would you give to developers who are just starting to explore AI tools?
Well, like for everything, I would recommend to start small. Like if you try to just take everything and use everything, you will not understand it. Like I think it's best to start with like the key features. For example, you can start by using Visual Studio Code with GitHub Copilot chat, for example. And that will give you a grasp of how it works. And by choosing different LLMs, you can play with it and stuff like that. And then you can jump to Cursor or to Windsurf or to any of those corporation tools that have many extra features. You can investigate them. Like, for example, there is a feature called the YOLO mode. YOLO mode means how to accept the changes and also being able to run terminal commands. You can customize that and be able to customize your developing workflow more than with just the Copilot chat. And I don't know, later on you can like experiment with non-famous LLMs, like the ones that you can achieve with, using OpenRouter. But of course, you have to take into consideration the privacy concerns that I mentioned before. And then trying to install the LLM locally, the ones that you can install locally, try to install them, try to use them, try to see if you can actually work with them, right? Because they can add more powers to your IDE. And then, of course, you can customize even more with the MCP servers or even create your own MCP servers, because I don't know if you have seen it, but on GitHub, but the SDK allows you to write MCP servers, both on TypeScript with SOT for schema validation or with Python. So, and actually that's officially, but you can actually write with more languages. So from that point, the possibilities are endless. You can configure your workflow at your convenience, depending on your project needs. And of course, also bear in mind that this will take you a lot of time. So again, anticipate if it's going to take you a long time, do it by chunks, do it in your free time as a hobby or whatever, because this thing is very fascinating, but at the same time, it's also very time consuming.
What features or capabilities would you like to see in next AI coding assistants?
Well, I mean, currently we are working with huge LLMs, which work amazingly. But I would like to see more interoperability between them, like what Cloud Code is doing under the hood with, Opus and Sonnet. Being able to choose one depending on the task would be amazing. But for that, I don't know what I'm talking about, because I'm not a developer of those things. But if the LLMs were like much lighter, like much smaller, and they could be installed locally, and they could communicate between them and let the agent make some interoperability. For example, like let's say there would be like the general LLM, and for any question you don't know how to answer, you just call the cloud or whatever. But let's say Google people would produce an LLM specifically for Angular. Wouldn't that be great? I mean, that would be amazing. Or especially for unit testing, like it would be fully aware of how the testbed works, for example, which no LLM does correctly nowadays, for example. And it could be a mini small LLM for each package of the Angular ecosystem. And those LLMs would be like maybe capable of interconnection and again, interoperability between them. That combination plus the cloud-based ones for other requests, only the strictly needed necessary ones, and that would be like very cool and very fast, I would say.
What are some of the lesser known but valuable skills that you think are crucial for success in tech?
I mean, let's take both of us. For example, you and I, we didn't go to university to study engineering, right? Still, you are the organizer of the most important Angular conference in Europe. And currently I am an architect and I am working with engineers. How would I have dreamed of that? Like in the beginning, I don't know, like, the best Java developer that I met in my life was an archaeologist. Not like Indiana Jones, a real archaeologist, right? So this guy was specialized in history and other things that have nothing to do with programming. And suddenly he decides to come with me into a course, learn PHP. 5 years later, I meet him and he is like one of the most regarded Java developers in Spain. How does that happen, right? So I guess the value of a good developer doesn't lay in the training, but in the interest it has for this technology, in the passion it shows. I have a passion for Angular and I have become good at it, I guess, I hope. And it is not because I know a lot about systems or I have studied engineering. I wish I would have, but I studied something different. So I guess it's your soul and your will what makes you a better developer. Sounds a little romantic, but I think it's true.
Definitely yes. How do you stay motivated during challenging projects?
It sounds a little bit masochistic, but when I have a huge problem that I don't know how to solve, I always have this feeling that I'm not going to be able to solve it. And I don't know how, but I have this maybe I'm just very stubborn, but I keep going and going and going and going and going and going and investigating and reading and trying and doing experiments and comment. Like what I did when I was a junior developer, for example, is I don't know from where in the heck this problem comes from. So I'm going to comment all the code and then I will start uncommenting chunks of the code to see if the problem persists or not. I think persistence is also a good quality, these situations where you think you are going to have to quit your job because you are not capable of doing it are the one that push you further and makes you realize that you are capable of anything. Yeah.
What music do you listen while working, if any?
Well, I am very old-fashioned. As you know, I also like rock and roll like you, but old one, I don't know. I think the last guy I liked playing electric guitar was Prince. But of course, I mean, I also like, I don't know, Miley Cyrus, for example. I think she's a great singer, or Beyonce, or things like that. But I also listen to classical music, to jazz music, to rhythm and blues, to everything. Like it's a combination. And I can tell you what I don't like, which is reggaeton. So I'm sorry for the fans, but the people who like, for example, Bad Bunny, which has been a phenomenon in Spain, like he has so many tickets. You will not see me buying a ticket for a Bad Bunny concert.
So if you weren't working in tech, what other profession would you like to try?
Well, I mean, like I said, I was previously working for other different fields. I used to work for media and television. I studied also music, so I used to work for classical music concerts, and I was also good at it. But of course, there are not many jobs in that field. It's difficult to maintain a stable job in audiovisual. My dream now that we are like confiding here, my dream was to become a filmmaker, like a Steven Spielberg or something like that. When I was a child, I've been going to the cinema since I was 9 months old, before I could even speak, and seeing a lot of movies. So that was my dream. And I can tell you, I know more about cinema than about Angular. So, and that's another passion of mine. It's more than a passion, actually. I would like to work there, but that's for another life.
Wow, that sounds amazing. What's your favorite way to unwind after a busy day of coding?
Sports. They have become a key part of my life, actually, because of course, I think people don't know that coding or working in IT is very stressing, actually. My best way to fight stress is by making my body suffer. I don't know. I do long runs. I'm a runner. I'm not a great runner. I swim a lot, and currently I am trying something called fitboxing, which also is very good against stress. So yes, I try a combination. I also tried yoga for a while, but it was not my cup of tea. I like cycling too, but I don't do it very, very often. Yeah, I guess I like sports, but again, I'm not good at them.
Andres, thank you. Thank you so much for this amazing podcast. It was a pleasure to host you here. I hope to see you at NG, JS, and AI Poland.
I will see you there.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.